August the 2nd, 2003, early evening. Rana Farooqi is with her beloved horse Toby when she's attacked and stabbed to death by former boyfriend Stephen Griffiths.
It was a vicious, horrible attack by a cowardly individual.
I know she would have fought, and she was alone and scared.
Now, Rana's family are bracing themselves for her killer's release from jail.
Griffiths isn't the one on the life sentence. We are.
Britain's darkest taboos reveals the shocking true stories behind the most horrific acts of familial crime, including torture.
I was torturing my sister. The axe actually entered her skull.
Abuse.
He'd sexually defiled George's body after her death.
And murder.
When he was strangling her, did she think in her head, I want my mum, where's my mum?
Farnham Common, Buckinghamshire, home to the Faruqui family, Mum, Dad, and their 3 children, Simon, Gemma, and Rana.
Rana is the second of my children. She was born about 5 years after her brother on September the 12th, 1967. She was great fun. She loved life, and she lived it to the full. Everything she did as best as she could. I adored her because she just made me laugh. She did things that I would have loved to have been like Rana. She was brave, very brave.
Rana has a passion for horses and learns to ride almost as soon as she can walk.
She got me involved in horse riding from a very young age. I think we've got photos of me when I was about 18 months old riding with her. She was very passionate about her horses. She would much rather have been with her horses than gone to work or school or anything like that.
Oh, you don't look.
She had Toby and she used to drive him competitively, and she was very passionate about that.
Rana was larger than life regardless of whether she was riding or not. She basically took life by the scruff of the neck and got on with it.
Rana is close to her family, especially her father.
She was a daddy's girl. They used to argue a lot, but I think he liked her feistiness. It was a good relationship. She could wind him around her little finger. He always said he would worry about her. He said, I'll never worry about Simon, and I won't worry about Gemma, but I'll always worry about Rana. She never quite knew what was coming next. So her dad was quite special to her.
Psychologist Emma Kenny works with families in her clinic. She's been looking into the case of Rana Farooqi.
Rana is a woman who is strong, independent, she's in her 30s, but she's really happy in her world. She has an incredibly close bond with her family, she's very connected to her family in her local area, and of course she has a huge passion for horses, and that's really where Rana's life is. She hasn't found Mr. Right, but it's potentially because at this moment in time she isn't really looking, she's very contented in her world.
We weren't a family that sort of lived in each other's pockets, but we were always there for each other. And Gemma and Rana, there was a big gap, age gap, 12 years, but it was beginning to close, and they were good friends. No, I think we were a happy family.
But the happiness doesn't last. October 2001. Rana's father is diagnosed with cancer. The following April, he passes away. The whole family, especially Rana, is devastated.
It was very sad for all of us. It was quite sudden, but it was particularly hard on Rana because they were very close, and she struggled and she became quite vulnerable after he died.
Probably the one uncritical constant in her life had gone.
October 2002, 6 months after her father's death, Rana is back at work and meets 32-year-old IT consultant Stephen Griffiths.
He came to do a presentation. He worked for an IT company. And he asked her out and she said no.
Stephen Griffiths doesn't give up. He keeps calling Rana and asking her out. Rana's not interested and keeps turning him down. But Griffiths is charming and helps Rana as she comes to terms with the loss of her father.
Rana goes through an absolute tragedy. She loses her father. And obviously, during the grief process, we are so open and prone to deep feelings of vulnerability. And the reality is that these feelings of vulnerability are the appropriate moment for Stephen Griffiths to enter her life. He sees an entry point where she is vulnerable and takes advantage of that fully.
Then Stephen Griffiths gets news that his own mother has died.
He asked her to go to the funeral with him. So she did, because she felt sorry for him, and they're both going through the same thing, losing a parent. So it was kind of after then that they started seeing each other. The reason she went out with him was, I think she felt sorry for him with his mum, but also she thought, you know what, I'll give it a go. We'll see, we'll go on a date. She was kind of looking for love, so she thought, you never know, he might grow on her.
Rana brings Stephen home to meet the family. He's charming and out to impress.
He was very tall, very well-maintained, had like a perfect goatee beard and designer clothes, drove a nice car. But yeah, he was very perfect in the way that he presented himself.
He didn't have horns growing out of his head. He wasn't carrying a blood-stained axe. There was nothing about him, first impressions, to indicate that his brain was wired completely wrong.
Just a few weeks after they start dating, Stephen Griffiths tells Rana the lease on his flat has run out and he needs somewhere to stay. She agrees to help him out, but only on a temporary basis.
Rana said, well, stay with me for a few weeks. You know, that's fine. And she only had a small cottage. And he basically took it over with all his stuff. He had a lot of belongings. I remember talking to her and she said that every time she would say, oh, you know, there's more stuff coming into the house. You know, you have a lot of computers and a lot of belongings. He would get angry with her and say, well, you know, we're a couple, you can't get precious about your home. This is going to hopefully be our home at some point, you know, if you want this relationship to last.
Former Detective Superintendent David Swindle has dealt with hundreds of cases involving abusive relationships.
He moves very quickly in this relationship, very quickly forms this relationship with her hardly developed, and he's staying with her. He's moved in, moved all his belongings. Very convenient that he no longer had anywhere to stay. And next thing you know, he's there. He's part of her life.
December 2002. The family invites Stephen Griffiths to join them for Christmas Day. It's the first since the death of Rana's father, and a sombre occasion for the family. But Griffiths is determined to create a good impression.
They came over Christmas morning and he was loaded. with presents for her. There was everything. All designer, all, and it just went on and on and on, these presents.
This is for you.
And I must admit, I thought, he's only known her a couple of months, and he's done all this. It was a bit strange.
I remember my mum and I feeling uncomfortable that he'd lavished all this money on her, and they hadn't known each other for very long. And she was opening presents, a lot of presents, and it got quite uncomfortable for all of us.
Stephen Griffiths is one of those people who likes the world to think that he's succeeding. He wears sharp suits, he drives a flash car, he likes his possessions. And that's a light bulb, isn't it? That's a light bulb moment, because for Rana, she is essentially becoming one of those possessions. And the problem is that people who view you as possessions can decide when they wish to dispose of you.
Although he's outwardly charming, behind closed doors and away from the rest of the family, Griffiths is starting to show his true colours. He bullies Rana and attempts to control every aspect of her life.
He got to her because she was at a low ebb. I think if her father had been around, none of this would have happened. He just managed to get into her life at a wrong time for Rana. I mean, she went home one day and he'd cooked a meal, fish, which Rana didn't like at the best of times. And it had gone cold because she was late. And he put it in front of her and made her eat it. And he would tell her, I don't know how anybody could love you, Rana. You're so difficult to live with and everything. He didn't abuse her physically, but he certainly did a very good job psychologically. She changed. We could see her changing. He had gradually got her to this point of controlling her.
Rana's relationship with Stephen Griffiths is on the rocks. But when Rana tries to end it, events take a sinister turn.
At that point, I thought, this breakup isn't going to go normally.
Rana Farooqi's 5-month relationship with Stephen Griffiths isn't working out. Griffiths is trying to take control of Rana's life. And her family is starting to notice a change in her.
He didn't abuse her physically, but he certainly did a very good job psychologically.
March the 14th, 2003. Rana plucks up the courage to tell Griffiths their relationship is over.
She was very independent, did her own thing, and she just had enough. So she asked him to leave.
Griffiths refuses to leave, but Rana calls the police, and eventually he hands over the keys and walks out. But the next thing Stephen Griffiths does takes everyone by surprise.
He came in and he got his laptop and he said, I'd like to show you something, and went through this PowerPoint presentation. It was all to do with how he was going to win her back. And I can remember saying to him, Stephen, I really don't want to see this. If anybody should see it, it should be Rana. But, quite honestly, you've split up now. And always when there's a split, one person gets hurt more in the relationship. And it happens to be you this time. Just notch it up to experience and move on.
What Stephen does here is completely outside the norms of reality for two reasons. One, his relationship is with Rana, not with her mother, so that particular exchange is unnecessary. But secondly, a PowerPoint presentation is business orientated. It suggests you are applying for a job or getting promoted. It suggests possession and desire. And unfortunately, that's a perfect metaphor for the way that Stephen Griffiths views his relationship with Rana. This is about him achieving something and proving that he can.
But the PowerPoint presentation is just the beginning. April 2003, and Griffiths refuses to accept the relationship is over. He starts a campaign of harassment and begins stalking Rana.
He was standing outside her house taking photographs. She was told this by her next door neighbour who worked a night shift. He broke her fence down. I rang her up and said, I'll have it repaired. And then he went to pubs where her friends were and everything and tried to get in that way.
We didn't really take it that seriously at the time. He was just very irritating. She was angry. She was so angry. She just wanted him out of her life and to get on with her life.
Griffiths has left a lot of his possessions at Rana's house and is refusing to move them out.
He wouldn't take any of his belongings. So eventually she moved all his belongings out of her house and we moved them all into my mum's garage so that he didn't have to contact her.
Simon came over to help us. We put stuff in the car. And then I said to her, what about the loft? And she said, oh no, loft. Anyway, I said, well, just check in case there's something up there. And the loft was chock-a-block with his stuff. Bags and bags and bags of stuff.
And said, what the hell is going on? Why is all this stuff up here? Why is there so much of it? How have you let it get in here so quickly? But it was at that point I thought, this breakup isn't going to go normally standard.
Griffiths continues to stalk Rana, turning up at places where he knows she'll be.
He went to Windsor Horse Show, parked his car next to hers, had binoculars trained on her. Then he was up a tree, taking photographs of her in Windsor Great Park when she was competing. And when she complained to the stewards and they went and asked him, he said he was the official photographer.
Rana wants to put a stop to the stalking and end all contact with Griffiths. She reports his behaviour to the police.
She did everything right. She rang the police. Police told her to keep a diary. She kept the diary methodically. We all had to tell her when he'd phoned us or when, but it didn't really work.
June 2003. Griffiths is twice spoken to by the police. He's told to leave Rana alone, but he ignores the warnings and continues to harass her. Rana feels scared and intimidated.
She was being followed around and harassed by a man that she no longer wanted anything to do with. He was not taking no for an answer, and he was behaving in an increasingly threatening manner.
And she came in one day and she said, I'm fed up with this. She said, I can't live my life. He's always there. She must have laid in bed at night, sometimes scared.
Covert threats, psychological pressure. The mere fact that he was outside her house at 3 o'clock in the morning, wasn't doing anything, was on a public highway. It's that cumulative effect that it has on wearing down the individual, the target, and instilling fear in them.
So in isolation, appearing at her house, standing outside in the street, nothing wrong. Appearing at a pub, nothing wrong. Appearing at a horse meeting, nothing wrong. But collectively, it's a circumstantial chain of events. And what you had was progressive behaviour here. With Griffiths, small things then escalating and proving and corroborating. This was a murder waiting to happen.
July 18th, 2003. The brake pipes on Rana's car are severed. There's no evidence Griffiths is responsible, but there's little doubt in Rana's mind.
She was away at a horse show and she came back and the brakes in her car didn't work. She had a mechanic look at them. She took them to the police.
To me, that definitely marked an escalation. And I got in touch with Rana and I said, well, what are you doing about it? And she said, well, I've been to the police. And again, oh, good, something's being done. I can relax, not knowing that this was the final act we were in.
As Stephen Griffiths' stalking campaign against Rana Farooqi continues, he is becoming dangerously obsessed.
She knows, she just knows instinctively that he is wishing her harm.
Griffiths is preparing to make his final move, with devastating consequences. It's the summer of 2003. Stephen Griffiths has been stalking Rana Farooqi for several months. Rana's frightened, but determined to carry on with her life, in spite of Griffiths. She spends an evening with her sister and a friend.
And we were all just really happy. We were chatting and, you know, we had a really lovely evening, and that's what I miss is my friend. She was my friend.
Saturday, August the 2nd. Rana's younger sister Gemma is planning to celebrate a friend's birthday, but first pays her respects to her father.
I remember going up to my dad's grave to go and see him. It was a Saturday. I went to go and see him, spent 5-10 minutes there. I went out that night with some friends in Oxford, so it was getting ready to go out. You know, I was only 23, 24. So going over to my friend's house, going to get ready, knowing that we were going to have a really good night out, and then the following day I was going to go and help my mum with Toby.
It's 8:30 p.m. and it's still light. Rana goes to get a horse Toby in from the field. She looks up and sees Griffiths walking towards her.
You just have to stop and think for a minute how Rana would have felt in the moment that she sees Stephen Griffiths walking towards her. She's isolated. She has no protection because she knows, she just knows instinctively that he is wishing her harm.
Rana calls 999 and begs Griffiths to leave her alone, but he attacks her, stabbing her repeatedly with a hunting knife.
To be murdered by an individual that we once invited into our worlds is terrifying on every level. Firstly, because we allowed them an entry point, but secondly, because if we had excluded them from our worlds, we would know that we wouldn't be in that position. All those feelings going through your head in those final moments, and having nobody to be there to protect you, nobody to look after you, to be at his mercy.
That night, Rana's mother gets a knock on the door.
There was a lady constable, another young constable in uniform, and a detective. And he stepped over my doorstep. And I said, Gemma, because I thought, oh God, she's out in Oxford. He said, no, Rana. And I said, oh. And he said, she's dead. And that's how I got told.
Police ask Simon to come to his mother's.
I walk into the kitchen, Mum gets up and She said, he's killed her. And that's basically when our lives ended.
With Griffiths still at large, the family are taken to a nearby hotel and put under police guard. Simon contacts his younger sister Gemma, who's out celebrating her friend's birthday.
And I said, "Is it Rana?" And he said yes. And at that point, I thought, oh, it's Steve. He's got her. But I just thought maybe he'd hurt her, done something, to the horse or to her. But I just thought she was in hospital and we were going to go and see her in hospital.
Gemma joins the rest of the family.
I remember getting into the lobby of the hotel and my brother coming towards me saying she's dead. And that's kind of the last thing I remember. They told us that she'd been stabbed and it was in the field while she was getting Toby in from the field. I think the main thing was thinking that she was all alone fighting. I know she would have fought and she was alone and scared.
You just close down. Everything closes down. You can't really take it in. It's a very odd feeling. When people die because they're ill, it's very sad and it's, very traumatic. But when somebody dies the way Rana died, it's totally different. It's absolutely pointless. She loved life so much. She just wanted Stephen out of her life. What a waste. Complete and utter waste.
Murder never ever crossed my mind. I thought he'd beaten her up. Or something, that he'd done something, and that she was in hospital. Again, even then, even in those moments, I never ever thought she was dead. Because, you wouldn't believe that someone you love is dead. People get ill and die, they don't get murdered.
You can say it quite cold-bloodedly now. But it was the 16 times he stabbed her that I can't get out of my head.
That's the real tragedy. The fact that this woman who was loved and cared for, connected to so many people who were vital in her world, in her last moments was completely on her own. Eradicated and murdered and executed by a man who only saw her as a possession that he could choose to dispose of.
The focus shifts to the manhunt. Police name Griffiths as their prime suspect. Griffiths is still at large and needs to be found.
I think all of us knew that it was Steve. Although we weren't scared of him, when that news came to us, we were like, oh my God, he's done it.
You suddenly think, we've got, because they said, can you remember his car registration? Can you remember the colour of his car? Can you remember? And you start thinking, you've got to help these people because he's got to be caught.
Police fear Stephen Griffiths could try and leave the country. They issue an all-ports alert. His name and his photograph is circulated across Europe. Stephen Griffiths is on the loose, and Rana's family want him caught and brought to justice before he can strike again.
This is someone that was calculating, terrorising a victim.
Yeah, I am scared. Because this is a scary guy.
August 2003. Stephen Griffiths stalked his former girlfriend Rana Farooqi for months, then stabbed her to death in a frenzied attack. Now, he's on the run.
I think Rana was basically dead from the first time she phoned the police and said he was harassing her and everything. I think we can say that that was the beginning of the end.
August the 7th. After 5 days on the run, Griffiths hands himself in to the police.
We were just getting ready to go down to the police station when they rang in and said he'd given himself up. It was a lot of relief because Mum had been the one that probably had the most contact with him after Rana. And we were genuinely concerned that he would come after her.
I have dealt with literally hundreds of murders. It's a horrendous one. This is someone that was calculating, terrorising a victim, following her, knew where she was, where she would be that day, purchased tools. He killed her. He couldn't have her. No one else could. It was a vicious, horrible attack by a cowardly individual.
December 2004. Reading Crown Court. Stephen Griffiths pleads guilty to murdering Rana Farooqi and is jailed for life. He's told he will serve a minimum of 16 years, reduced to just under 14 years on appeal. In sentencing him, the judge takes into account the fact that at the time, Griffiths was under great mental stress and is of previous good character. He has since expressed remorse.
How can you say that someone could possibly be let out in 14 years for murdering someone? I think it's ridiculous. You know, he was given a life sentence with parole in 14 years. So he may not get out in 14 years, but supposing he does, he can carry on with his life. But she doesn't have her life anymore.
Rana was in her early 30s. Who knows how many years she had ahead of her? How many years she had to spend with a partner, with her nephews and nieces, with the rest of her family. 14 years, this guy could be out and rebuilding, making some sort of attempt to rebuild his life. So there's the feelings of, well, where's the justice in that? Where's the sense in that?
His behaviour escalated. It escalated from stalking to murder in a very short period of time. I imagine that the family lie awake every night wondering how they will cope knowing that that man gets to walk the streets free when their beautiful daughter and sister was executed alone in a field.
Griffiths could be released on parole as early as 2017.
We've been planning for this pretty much since he was sentenced. Griffiths isn't the one on the life sentence. We are.
Of course we're worried. I do worry for my family's safety. I won't I'm quite happy now he's in prison because he can't get to us, and you know, there's however much I say, I'm hoping that he'll move on because he won't want to go back to prison. You'll always be looking over your shoulder, just in case.
Yeah, I am scared because this is a scary guy. He's already killed once. He has none of those boundaries or inhibitions that stop the rest of us from killing.
I try not to think about it too much. I dread it. I just have a dreadful feeling about him actually being out on the street, and I could pass by him or see him across the road. That's a big fear.
We have had no closure in the sense that there's never been any certainty for us. He might be out in 14 years, he might not. We need some certainty, and we've been denied it all the way through.
It's not over. I don't think it'll ever be over.
He will come out into the community, but what I would like to think is that the licence conditions surrounding Griffiths when he's in the public are very, very strict, and he's supervised in the community, and that he does not pose any risk or threat, and that the family are aware of this, because they have to live with the loss of their daughter. They then have to live with the knowledge that the person that killed their daughter is out in the community.
Rana's mother has set up the Protection Against Stalking charity, and new laws have been introduced, making it easier for victims of stalking to get justice.
Rana's life wasn't just for nothing, it was for something, and that's the whole point of the charity. That's the whole point of doing this, or talking at conferences and things, to make people aware, and probably a completely selfish thing. I'm keeping Rana's name alive, and that's important to me. I don't feel achievement or anything. I just feel for me, for our family, Rana is doing some good.
Through the charity, her death has saved, hopefully, many other women's lives. You have to believe that all the work that we've done over the years, her death wasn't in vain.
Rana was an incredibly strong woman. She had great relationships, she had a great life, and the truth is that when he was unable to control her, when he saw that she was free and that he could never have a position in her world, it angered him to such a point that he was unwilling to allow her to continue. Rana, unfortunately, lost her life, and nothing can make up for that. But Rana's family have done everything they can to put their energies into protecting other people who may suffer from stalking situations. And because of that, they've had some success in campaigning. And this just shows that Stephen Griffiths, even now, cannot control Rana, because her legacy will live on.
For Rana's family, there is so much they have lost and will never get back.
Well, my wedding, I would have loved her to have been there. She would have been a bridesmaid. She would have had quite a lot to say. My children, I would have loved her to have met my children. I know she would have been a wonderful aunt to them, and I know they would have adored her.
There is no way I would describe Rana as anybody's victim. It isn't the weak. It isn't the wishy-washy. It isn't the easily manipulated. It can happen to anyone.
You know, I see my daughter riding a horse, or being with Toby. I would just wish that she could be there to see that.
And I can see her going over the jumps and just no fear. And I can see her galloping off. And I think that's her. She was happy, and you know, you could see that was she just loved it.